Thanks a lot, seniors. I think they got me mic'd up, so it's going to be kind of weird for a second. Can you hear me? You're good? So, how you guys doing?
Good, sir.
Captain, you didn't take that seat, right?
Yes, sir, sorry.
That's all good. So, no, I appreciate the warm welcome. I've been here for about 48 hours now. You know, it's been 20 years since the last time I stepped foot in Alaska, doing my 4 years up north at Allison Air Force Base. So I've told your leadership here, but I'm here again, so I don't know how I earned one of those Arctic tabs, but I'm leaving here with an Arctic tab one way or another. So I don't know. Don't get caught in the hallway by yourself, on the break. No, but I'm honored to be back here in Alaska. Senior, thank you for the introduction. She did a great job. I told her she had about 1 minute to say whatever she had to say, and she did an amazing job. Yeah, so she kind of gave my background. Did serve in the United States Air Force for 25 years, 7 months, 14 days, and 90 minutes. So I didn't count my time, right? But during that time, I had the honor to serve as a defender and retire as the Air University Command Chief about 2 years and 2 months ago. Goes by fast. So what am I doing here? What are you doing here? You're probably like, hey, who's this guy? Who's this retired guy? I'm not here to chief you. She did say I'm retired, but I've loved the name in 1976 in a small hospital in Savannah, Georgia that my mom gave me. That was a very random name out of a book, Todd Simmons. So I'm very comfortable with that name, and I'm okay with anyone calling me that. I spent about 7 years not knowing who I was because it was, hey, chief. And another, multiple years with people calling me the airman or sergeant. So I'm okay with Todd at this point in my life. So what are we talking about? So I don't want to talk at you today, right? We got some time here. I love the fact that this is a group, and I love this room actually, an intimate conversation. I've been here, and this is probably my sixth group, or maybe 5 or 6 times talking to somebody over the last 2 days, of groups of folks. And I end my time here at the base today talking to your chiefs at the end of the day. So for me, I want, as I reflect on the last 2 days, like I said, I'm not in the Air Force and I'm not here to chief you. We talked about, over the last 2 days, where the world is today, and really reflection point of how we are as human beings in this world, not only in uniform in the Air Force, but how are we operating today, not only post-COVID, but how do we operate with 5 generations on the field, essentially? And that's what we have today. At no time in the history on Earth have we had such a diverse group of people all in the workforce at the same time, with such a different mindsets and different understanding of what my purpose is, what my passion is, what drives me to get up every day. We've never had that. If you go back 110 years ago and you look at this same situation of 4 generations potentially all in the workforce at the same time, they all went home in the same situation. No cell phones, no nothing, it was nothing, right? But we all have people who think of things differently today, right? Who's our 20-year-old? How old are you, sir? Man, I just guessed it, right? I've never met him before. But you're 20, right? So you're from a completely different understanding, and that's okay, of what my mom, who is 78 years old, is, right? My mom is from the boomer, generation. And her understanding of work is not the same understanding of even my understanding of work. And my understanding of work is maybe not the same. Doesn't make you any better, any worse, my mom any better, any worse. So how do we get past understanding? How do we get to a point where we're now understanding the cause and effect of what we are doing and what we're not doing? And that's what we want to have an open discussion about today. Talk a little bit about organizational culture. We're going to talk about some different things. So for me, I'm going to get personal at some times, and I'm just going to want to hear from you all the time. But when we were talking about what, when you're, senior and I was dialoguing with all of your leadership about what can we talk about today, don't worry, that title is big, right? Leadership that shapes the future. What does that even mean? But I wanted to kind of, dial that into something that I think we can tackle today. We can leave. What can we leave this room with as a tool, as something to reflect on, as something to take away today and say, this is something I need to probably look at and maybe add to my toolbox, or make even strengthen that tool that I already have. And that's really connection, right? You're going to hear me use that word about 50 million times over the next, hour and a half that we're together. Connection. How do we connect as humans? Do you think, what's your name, sir?
This is Jackson.
I'm sorry?
This is Jackson.
Oh, the microphone kind of scared me. I didn't realize this tape was very sophisticated. You say Justin?
Jackson.
Jackson?
Mm-hmm.
Where are you from, Jackson?
Mississippi.
Jackson, Mississippi. Are you from Jackson, Mississippi?
I'm from Vicksburg, Mississippi. But it's close enough.
They just wanted to live in Jackson?
Yeah.
That's interesting. If I ask you, how do people connect with you, Jackson? Oh, your last name is Jackson. What's your first name?
It's hard to say, but it's Quar Jeremy, like 4 and Jeremy.
Quad Jeremy?
Yeah.
Okay. See, that's what I'm saying. Like if I ask you where you're from, ma'am, where are you going to tell me?
Where am I from?
Where are you from?
Baltimore, Maryland.
But if I ask you where you're from, what are you going to tell me, sir?
Salt Lake City.
But she already gave you the answer. Yesterday, I asked someone sitting here where they're from. They told me they're Squadron. Because typically when we introduce each other, what are the 4 things that you're going to tell me about yourself? Hey, who are you? How you doing? I'm Todd Simmons. I walk up to you. What do you usually tell me? What do your airmen tell you when they introduce themselves?
Pretty much the same thing as everybody else. Where they're from.
3 to 4 things is really what people talk about. What I do, where I'm from, maybe. Hey, I'm from LRS. My name is Todd Simmons. I've been here a year. And then we just do this awkward stare at each other. That's what we do. And then we just look at each other and then we go, well, nice to meet you. And we break contact. And we think of that as a connection, and it's not. And I'll tell you, in this world today, what we are getting, I won't say wrong, but what's the most important thing that, and I'm probably jumping way ahead of myself right now, but I'm trying to set the stage of what we're going to do today and what we're going to talk about and how today, in today's Air Force, Space Force, Amazon, wherever, store outside the gates, it's all the same. Everything is the same. Everybody is fighting for the same thing. Everybody's fighting for purpose-driven employees. So a little bit about what we do. So I retired from the Air Force, started this company, Courageous Leadership Alliance, 2.5 years ago, really 3 years ago before I retired. And it started out as me and a laptop and a microphone. And it's grown to 17 people. And we do predominantly leadership development, continuing education, but we specialize in organizational culture. And how do you define that? How do you take a workforce and make it and optimize that workforce with people who have purpose and passion, right? And that's not only from my military experience, and I look back, but a lot of it is looking back at my military experience. And one thing when I got into this business is I look back at 11 assignments that I had in the United States Air Force. 11 assignments in 25 years, 5 of them in 8 years, and my last 5 assignments. And I look back and I go, what organization did I show up to every day, woke up in the morning, spent 8 to 14 hours in that organization, and it felt like someplace I just couldn't wait to come back to the next day? Well, how many of those organizations existed in my 11 assignments? And I look back and I can only find 2. How many can you say, sir?
1.
How about you, sir?
1.
1. How about you, sir?
Probably 1.
1. Oh, you got. So I hate to put the A1Cs and the airmen on spot because they're supervisors sometime in the room and they're like, sir, don't do this to me. Do not do this to me right now because I only have 1. Either my number is 1 or 0, and 0 is dangerous. But no, honest answer though. None. How about you, ma'am?
None.
How about you, ma'am?
None.
How about you, sir?
1.
How about you, Jackson? Jackson wrote it out in air quotes. How about you, Captain?
Non-attribution?
This you shouldn't
You're
even.
from Mary University. I just want to double check. Yeah.
No, I'm from Rockville, Maryland, because that's where I live. I haven't been on active duty in 2.5 years.
I went to high school in Rockville, Maryland. I would say 0 as well. And this is my 5th assignment.
I will tell you, it's nothing to be ashamed of by saying that or have any hesitancy. That's actually the number. That's actually common. right? This is not, I just don't go to everyone like, oh, Google, I want to work at Google and I want to work at Amazon. I want to work at all these places. It's no different, right? You see Amazon's badge up there. We do culture assessments and leadership training for Amazon managers on the West Coast. And guess what? 70% of their managers are walking out of the door. We're in this zone right now in the world where people are no longer going to accept average. Take that as a note for a second, because I want to get back to that. But people are no longer going to accept average. Average is no longer the standard of work. And when I mention that, and we'll go deeper into when we get into multi-generational leadership, is that it's nothing wrong with what my mom did for 50 years working. My mom got up at 5 o'clock this morning, and you know what she did at 78 years old? My mom went to work. She went to work to a business that she sold 15 years ago. And she sold it 15 years ago, and she is showing up every morning at 5 o'clock for the last 15 years. It's just a different mentality. I don't know if my mom knows what a vacation is. I don't think, I don't think that word or that vocabulary is really something that's like, vacation for her was probably 2 days off in Thanksgiving when she got to cook for 50 people who came to visit us. That was probably her vacation. I'll get to spend some time with my family, and then I'm going to go to work the next day. That was vacation for her. Is that vacation for you, Jackson? You look forward to time off?
Not quite, no.
How do you relax, sir?
Going out, being outside, probably.
You work, what's your work schedule?
Or from 12 in the afternoon to 9 at night.
What's your shift schedule? Like 3 on, 3 off, or
5 on, 2 off.
5 on, 2 off? On those 2 days, do you go into work because you just feel like you need to be there? You say no? How about you, Jackson? You go to work on your days off? No?
Definitely not.
How about you, ma'am?
No, sir, unless I'm asked.
And then when you ask, you got a little bit of face, right? My generation, who was raised by a boomer, I used to go to work on my day off a little bit. You're a little guilty of that? How many, I'm picking on the older people now, right? Pick on younger people. How many of you can't disconnect when it's time to disconnect? How many of you go home and you're still looking at your phone, or you're still thinking about something that you have to do the next day, and you're in this cycle of, I have to do. I'm going to tell you right now, they're not in that cycle. And it doesn't make them bad people. It doesn't make them any less wanting to come to work or not come to work. It just doesn't. And we're not understanding the nature of work in this country anymore. It's shifting. And I'm going to get into some things here later about that. But we're going to start because none of you know each other. I don't care if you, and I really mean that, none of you really know each other in this room. But we're going to get to know each other. I need somebody who's going to help me out here. There's a stack of papers here that's face down here, right there, sir. Can you hand me half of them? And can you make sure everyone gets one? And I'll help you out with that. Thank you, sir. Who works together?
All of us right here, the young airmen, a lot of us young airmen.
Young airmen? Why can't you just be there? Why you gotta be young airmen? All of us, everyone in this room is airmen. Why you gotta be young airmen? Can you pass some of these behind you too also?
Yes, sir.
So who works together?
4 of us.
So Jackson, what's your first name, sir?
Andrew.
Andrew? Jackson, tell me 11 things about Andrew that has nothing to do with work. Tell me 11 things that you know about Andrew that has nothing to do with work or being in the Air Force.
His race is Caucasian. His name is Andrew. He's in the Air Force. He's wearing a camouflage uniform. He's wearing combat boots. He has the American flag on his right shoulder. He has a nose, eyes, teeth, eyebrows, and ears.
That is amazing. I think that's so amazing because that's really what we know about each other. And that's what we also make judgment.
He owned a Ford truck.
Okay, that's even better. And that's how we make our interaction. How long have you worked with him?
About 2 months.
2 months. Who else? Who else in here? Who else in here works together? What's your name, ma'am?
Dajila.
I'm sorry?
Dajila.
We'll work on that. What's your name, sir?
Carson.
Carson. Can you tell me 11 things about Carlson that has nothing to do with the military or uniform or eye color or American flags?
He likes to play video games. He knows how to drive manual. He is engaged. He likes history. That's all I can think of.
Okay. How long have you worked with Andy?
2 months.
2 months? How long does it take to make a connection with each other?
Depends on the person.
Why does it depend on the person?
When I know when I met my fiance, the time it took me to get to know her, it was, to me it felt like weeks, but for her, she said it was several months.
Okay. Need y'all to ride with me with this for another 20 minutes or so, right? There's a point to this. You know, when we talk about anything in this world and we're talking about, you know, leading in the future and the nature of work, it all starts with this foundation, right? I'm the worst constructor. Who anybody here is structural CE or anything? You don't have to be to understand this point, but I was talking to a structural guy one day. I was like, can you build a house without a foundation? You can? Oh, I thought you raised your hand. I'm like, yeah, I would love to live. I would love to see you live in that house, right? You can't build a house without a foundation. You just can't. You can't go out there and just frame some wood and say, I'm going to frame it, I'm going to put all this stuff in it, I'm going to put a roof on it, and we're going to live in this house. You can't do that. It has to have a foundation. And for some reason, we forgot what that foundation has been. And I'm not talking about we as the United States Air Force, we as a society. Most of us cannot tell more than 5 things about the person who sits next to us more than we spend our time at home. And then we think about these things and we use these words resiliency and we use these words, how do we get increased DNI or how do we do all of these things? You can't do anything without knowing the person next to you. I had a conversation about unconscious bias yesterday with the DNI group. How do you fight unconscious bias if I don't know who you are? And I tell this story about connection because we tend to not want to connect with people and then it starts telling us, we start creating our own visions and stories about who people really are. And we don't know when you're having a bad day, sir. We don't know if Jackson from next to Jackson, Mississippi is really, having a bad day or if Jackson, what personality traits or characteristics of him are saying what about him because we don't know, we're assuming. And I like to tell, why I do this exercise, I like to say, the biggest lesson I've ever had in my life is at 20 years old. Is I come from a small town. I come from a small town in South Carolina. And I grew up in predominantly everybody who ever associated with me looks like me. High school, family, neighborhood, everything. So when I joined the United States Air Force, this, like some of us, this was a huge awakening, like, what is this world that I'm in? You got all these people, all these cultures, all these different things. And I stuck to everything that I've known. Anytime that I would go somewhere, I would look for people who I assumed that I fit in with, right? Everywhere I would talk to at work was people who I thought I fit in with. And I excluded everyone else from a person. I would work, I was a defender, so I would be in a truck for 12 hours with people and not talk to them, right? And I remember we had this exercise and I was a senior airman and we froze posts, which meant that you got to work with the same person every day for 5 straight days. And I remember going to my master sergeant and begging him that I wanted to work with this airman so we can write rap lyrics. I'm like, I want to work with this airman because that's who I enjoy being around, right? And I'm like, me and Tavon are going to write rap lyrics for 5 days while we watch a fence. That was the plan, right? We're going to go out there and become rap stars in blue section in England. That was the plan. But then my flight chief said, no, you're working with this particular airman. And I said, ooh, I don't. And he just looked at me, and I'm a young African-American male. My flight chief is a master surgeon, and he's African-American too. And he said, this is who you're assigned with, this is who you're going to work with. And I'm like, oh man, I don't know. And it was a young man who also was a senior airman that he assigned me with. And I've worked with him. I even deployed with this dude to Bosnia for a couple of months. Worked on the same flight, everything. Came back. I don't think I can tell 5 things about this dude. If we had to work together, it was like, whatever. He was senior airman, just like me. He was a white male from Kentucky. And the first thing I did is put him in a box because of his accent, because I thought his mannerisms, because of this, because of that. And I was a young man. I was young 21-year-old, whatever. And we worked together for probably a year, and I never knew 5 things about this dude, other than he was from Kentucky, and I had an impression about him. See, this unconscious bias can happen with anyone. And I went home kind of struggling that I was going to be in a truck with him for 12 hours for 5 straight days. And the next day we armed up and we got our weapons and we're in this truck. And I'm sitting there and he's driving and 2 hours pass by and we haven't said 2 words to each other. And he was being cordial and we were just kind of small talking back and forth on the radio, no biggie. And then he turned on the radio and it was country and Western music. And he immediately turned it off. And I said, hey man, you can listen to whatever you want to listen to. And he said, no, I'm good. I'm good. And then another couple of hours of silence go by. And he said, hey, do you want to listen to some music? I said, yeah, man, turn the music on, whatever you want to listen to. And I guess he just was like, man, it's 6 hours into the shift and something got to happen. So he just turned the radio on and it was playing and he was playing some country music. And about 30 minutes later, 4 or 5 songs went past. I sung every one of them note for note. And I was looking at him, because that was just natural. I was just singing the songs. And I remember one of my favorite country songs, All My Exes Live in Texas. It's one of my favorite songs. Remember I said, I'm a black kid from South Carolina who grew up around no one who does not look like me. And he's looking at me and he's just looking and he's going, and I can see this perplexed look on his face like, what is this the Twilight Zone? What is this dude doing? And I looked at him and I said, hey man, and we were talking about the song, we talking about artists and we're talking about how rhythm and blues, is kind of, was kind of inserted into this particular song and talking about different things. And he was just looking at me like, what is going on? And we started having this conversation over that. Come to find out, well, for me, you all wondering, how do he know all these country songs? I was 15 years old, well, almost 15. For 2.5 years, I worked in a country and Western restaurant, which played country Western songs 24 hours a day. You ain't got no choice. But if I never worked in that restaurant, I probably never would. But now I started listening to the lyrics, listening to the bass line, listening to everything. And it was like, this is music like anything else. This is just music, and I actually like it. I actually want to learn more about it. So through that, this is over 20-something years ago. Through that conversation on a 12-hour shift, started with just something that neither one of us knew we would understand, grew into now a 25-year friendship. Grew into, I go to Kentucky and I'm the only black guy in his house. And I feel okay. I'm fine with it. He didn't retire. He got out after 4 years. Went back to Kentucky. And we've been friends ever since. Do we really know each other? Or do we pretend to know each other? And I tell you, this day and age, we put so many labels on the generations and saying that they don't want to connect. Is that true, Jackson? You don't want to connect? You don't want people to know you?
No, not quite. Like, I want it to be like a limit to what they know.
A limit. Do you have a limit to what you want people to know, ma'am?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I have a problem with oversharing personally, but when it comes to coworkers, yes. If I have some, for instance, me and Lieber, we have been together here at JBear since day one, tech school, all that. So he definitely knows me a little bit better on a personal level, more so than the new airman.
Okay. But you want people to respect you, though, Jackson, right?
Correct.
But how do you respect somebody you don't know? I mean, respect, you can say, hey, I respect you because you're a master sergeant, or you're my supervisor, or you wear a uniform. But how do you truly have a feeling of respect for me? How do you respect me as a human? How do you respect me as a mom, a dad, a brother? How do you respect me as someone who's struggling? Or how do you truly know me and respect me? We don't. And it's not anybody's fault. It's just where we've moved, right? And now we've seen this thing completely rip off, the lid ripped off, where now people are trying to redefine their purpose. Now people are going, is this really for me? And now we're seeing it in the workforce across this country. And we'll talk about that. But before we do that, I know you all have read the directions, right? There's a prize, all right? So I want everybody to stand up, right? So this is where you get out of your comfort zone. You know, you have, who's not played, first of all, who've not played tic-tac-toe? I've had some people who like, I don't understand this game. I'm like, well, where you at? So you can go, tic-tac-toe rules, right? But you have to get a line. It could be diagonal, so across, up, down, or across. So you cannot ask the same person more than 2 questions in a row, right? You cannot ask. So I would challenge you to ask your first question to someone that you have never spoke to. I would challenge you to do that, to find someone in the room that you have never talked to in your life as your first question. So just don't turn to your tech school buddy and ask him the first question. So we're going to give you about 10 minutes to do this. And the time starts now. It was a lot of interaction. The whole point of this exercise is exactly, I told Johnny I was going to call him out. The whole point of this exercise is exactly what Johnny walked up to me. Johnny and I both look the same, probably got similar backgrounds and stuff. And I said, he was walking past me and I said, Johnny was like, so you could ask me a question. And he was like, what did you say? You're going to ask the hard question? He's like, you pay. He's like, and you already knew that the answer was going to be no, right? And I said, yes. And what was the question you asked? He was like, okay, I'll ask you this. What did you ask me?
Well, the first one I was going to ask was, have you met somebody famous? So I automatically assumed because of what you're doing and where you're at.
And then you're like, yeah, you said that's an easy question. And then you say, oh, yeah.
I'm going to ask you the harder one. So we regularly do yoga.
And I said what?
Yes.
And your look was like, huh? I do this exercise with thousands of people. And that's the whole point of this exercise is that exact point right there, is that you're only the second person ever to ask me that question. And then both times they asked me, it was kind of like I had to stop. They was like, well, I'll give it a shot. My wife is a master yoga instructor. She does yoga in India, everywhere. She's actually going to India for 14 days here in a couple of months. She's been teaching yoga for 17 years. I regularly practice. Yin is my favorite, deep stretching and all of this stuff. So why would I not? But who would ever know that, right? It's already, and I'm just going to be honest. The first thing people have always asked me when I was young, and I was young, and the first thing I get to a squadron, what do you think the first thing people started asking me? Do I play basketball? I've never played basketball other than neighborhood shooting around. I played football. I've never played organized basketball one day in my life. But I've probably been asked if I played basketball 2 million times. If that thing on that sheet was, Did you play basketball in high school? I probably would have got asked that question 15 times. But no one's going to ask me if I do yoga. Why not? Just like no one is going to think I know country music. We will never know anything about each other if we don't get to the foundation of who we are and actually break down these things that we believe people are, which they're not. That's what true connection is. And that was funny. That just accidentally happened right before we stopped. And I was like, well, Johnny, this is why we do this. Because no one was going to walk up to me. No one ever walks up to me and asks me that question. I had the second person ever. I'm sorry. I had somebody chuckle wax at me like, yeah, I'm not. I'm like, well, actually, I did yoga this morning, brother. Is that regularly to you? But we did have 2 winners who yelled out really fast. LT. What's your name, LT? Jacob. And it was,
Nah, I read the rules again. I didn't win, sir.
Oh, Alicia. Integrity first right here. I took his word for it. So the LT, I'll get your information afterwards. LT gets 4 hours of free coaching. And coaching is $250 an hour. So you can pick one of our coaches or you can pick me or whatever. You get 4 free hours. If you think you want. If you can donate it if you want to.
I'm selfish.
Okay. Integrity again. At least he didn't fake it and go, well, I'm probably going to look for someone, in my shop. No, I'm going to take it. Awesome. Make sure I get your information before I leave. I ran out of cards. But all right. So let me go back to this. I said I was going to pick on someone, and I forgot who it was. Hey, ma'am.
Hi.
What'd you learn about? Give me 2 things you learned about someone.
So I was talking to a French, and he has a cat named Jameson, but immediately I was like, oh, that's really fancy, and then immediately I was like, oh, that's the whiskey. He's like, yeah, I'm like, all our animals are named after liquors, and then I wanted to know more, like, what are the other ones named?
But is that an interesting, how would that fact come out anywhere? I mean, how would that fact come out anywhere? I mean, that's interesting. I'm going to go name something after whiskeys now. I don't know. I don't have cats, but what'd you learn about somebody, sir?
I learned that Amanda Harris does yoga regularly.
Where's Amanda at? All right. Why'd they ask Amanda that and not me?
It was kind of like, we were kind of just 3 of us were in a conversation. Actually, I think I also learned that I don't know what mess up his last name, Orolana. He has a mentor, Dave Ramsey, and I think she knew who Dave Ramsey was, or somebody said that's a good mentor.
Okay, awesome. So Amanda, what did you learn? I saw you writing a lot of stuff.
Oh, I did have paper and pen, so I was like, I should write notes. I'm like, so I'm using paper. I learned, well, when we were in that conversation, I think like Dave Ramsey came up, and so I've been to a couple of his classes, and so, I totally forgot the guy's name. It's Roy. Right. Anyways, that was his mentor, Dave Ramsey, and I thought that's pretty cool. I was just like, oh, run too. So yeah.
Okay. What'd you learn, sir? Vehicle maintenance.
I learned a lot. I learned that Jackson and I are born in the same month. Lieber speaks Spanish. Cornell has a cat named Bishop. Sergeant French back there has a mentor. Sergeant Lazo's on Facebook.
I'm going to friend him at the break.
What's that?
I'm going to send him a friend request at the break. No, but I mean, this might seem really silly, right? But I want you to hold this note toward the end of my brief of why it's so important to know just a simple fact about somebody. And how do you operationalize that, right? And how do you operationalize that from the start? I always tell, I go around and I thought it was just the military, but it's actually not the military, and a lot of civilian companies are getting away from this. And I would, for some of us who are in the leadership and, more here, even in the younger folks who have experienced this, is the exit interview, right? How many of you have given an exit interview or been a part of an exit interview? When you leave an organization and then your last 2 or 3 days you come in, and what typically happens in an exit interview?
Discuss with the boss how the environment was and what things you think could be better or weren't so good or
Yeah.
were good.
Why does that happen on your last day?
Repercussions.
Huh?
Repercussions.
Is it really repercussions?
They assume you'll be honest.
Yeah. But everyone, I was in the Air Force. I was a chief. I had a lot of people come to me on the last day at the exit interview, and I was like, I worked with this person for 2.5 years. I knew none of that. I didn't know you were struggling with daycare. I didn't, honestly, sometimes I felt ashamed. I didn't even know you had kids. And I'm being transparent with you. Or some people go, I didn't know. I didn't know that one of your pets passed away and we didn't give you a couple of days off or on leave, or I didn't know any of this stuff, and you're leaving now. And 9 times out of 10, you're not leaving to go somewhere else. You're leaving out of our ranks. And I tell you this new thing about how I feel, and people, not everybody's going to agree. So I'm just going to spout facts to you, because some people go, this is not true. This is softening the world, or the military is too soft. We work with a lot of people, including Air Force recruiting. Anybody here is a recruiter? I wish I would have invited her back. It was a recruiter I talked to all the first sergeants yesterday, and she just recently came out of Air Force recruiting. And man, she understood, she was literally like, it was good to have the bounce back in here. But I would tell you, this thing about how we feel, how you make people feel, is a strategic imperative now. You can disagree or agree, but I'll just state facts. So how many of you are Chick-fil-A fans? I know it's not one in Anchorage. I just found that out, brutally found that out yesterday, as I will assume that there was a Chick-fil-A in Anchorage. And I mean, it was some upset people as I assumed that there was going to be Chick-fil-A for lunch. So who are Chick-fil-A folks again? So don't get upset with me. It's really not that good. Whoa. Did I see a bottle come at me? It's just chicken and pickles and bread.
It's a sauce.
No, it's not. I'm just being real. You're trying to find something. Next you're going to tell me, it's the bags that keep the temperature at a certain temperature. It's none of that. Is the chicken sandwich good? It's a good chicken sandwich. Have I had a better chicken sandwich? Yeah. Have I had a worse chicken sandwich? Yeah. But do they make me feel a certain type of way when I walk through the doors? When I drive into the parking lot? That's what you're buying. You're not buying a chicken sandwich. They fooled you to believe that. Chick-fil-A understood this 10 or 15 years ago in other companies, because 3 years ago, we didn't have the problems that we have today. 3 years ago, you didn't have to worry about McDonald's trying to get someone to work at McDonald's for $17 an hour and still can't get people to work at McDonald's. Or Target has to pay $24 an hour to get people to work. Or Burton's Bar and Grill in my neighborhood is now offering health care and college benefits to work at Burton's Bar and Grill. We didn't have these problems 3 years ago. We didn't, there's no less people to work. There are just people who are motivated to do what now becomes their purpose and passion. And their purpose and passion is not to go somewhere where they don't feel valued. That's what's happening right now. It's the biggest revolution of work, or the change of nature of work that's ever happened in our lifetime. Honestly, probably in the history of work since the Great Depression. And I use this as an analogy because all of you are so excited about Chick-fil-A. You're like raising your hands and all of this stuff, right? You're so excited. And you should be. It's a good chicken sandwich. But how many of you go to McDonald's? The same amount of you probably eat it. Everyone gives McDonald's that second chance. Let's just be honest, right? We give them second and third. Well, that's just what we do, right? We'll vow. We'll put the land. We are never coming back here. 2 months later, you're in the drive-thru like. And I've said this 3 or 4 times because I call it's the praying stop is what I coined it as, right? Every time you go to McDonald's drive-through and you get your bag, you actually stop and pray that your fries are hot. Don't you? Or even if there's a sandwich in the bag. How many of you do that at Chick-fil-A? You don't. 9 times out of 10, you grab your bag and you're trying to wreck getting a waffle fry. You're not worried about it. You're just trying to get one before you get out the parking lot. And I say that jokingly, but it's true. Think about that the same as your organizational culture. It's the same. People want to feel valued. People go to Chick-fil-A because 3 times they're going to call your name. 3 times they're going to acknowledge you. You can have a Chick-fil-A in the same neighborhood as the McDonald's. Guess what? They're the same kid, the same 19-year-old from the same neighborhood, sometimes the same parents. Why does the 19-year-old who works at McDonald's is going to throw you some cold fries? And why is the 19-year-old who works at Chick-fil-A is going to be my pleasure in the sun, in the rain, in the snow, and give you a consistent product? Same people. What's the difference? What's the difference, sir?
Training, I guess.
Training? You can say it's training. Yeah. Standards, right? More than McDonald's has standards. I used to work there as a kid too, for about 4 days. I couldn't get the patty thing going fast enough. They have standards. Who's been stationed in Japan? What do they say about Japan McDonald's?
It's fabulous.
They said it in unison. You have to go 4,000 miles to get McDonald's that tastes good. And it's no different. And I'm just going to be honest. In Japan, they do one thing: follow the rules. That's the only difference between a Japanese Tokyo, Japan McDonald's and a McDonald's here. Is literally they follow every rule in the manual. So the McDonald's actually, your fries are always brought to your table because they're never going to give it to you right there because they're cooking it fresh. The buns are going to be fresh. Everything's going to be fresh. So it tastes different, don't it? McDonald's Japan, after you eat McDonald's Japan, you can't eat McDonald's in the States anymore. It's just not the same because it's not consistent. And I always ask people about this blue sign. How many of you make your life decisions on the road on this blue sign? You're driving down the road and you see this blue sign and you start getting calculated going, I'm not stopping here because it's not the right combination. It's not stopping here because the gas and the fast food don't line up. I need a Chevron and a Chick-fil-A. Let's just be real. Why? Why are we so brand specific like that? I tell people, my wife and I get into some very heated discussions about this because I'm not a coffee drinker. She is. I'm a chai tea latte, Starbucks, almond milk with nutmeg drinker, right? So when we're I'm sorry?
And yoga.
And yoga. Not the typical South Carolina kid that looks like me, right? Don't drink coffee. I was a cop for 20 years and never touched a cup of coffee. 20 years. So we get in this sign and my wife will be, I need some coffee. And I'll say, where's the next Starbucks? And she'll look it up, and she'll be like, it's 42 miles. And she's like, we can just stop at this next convenience store and get me some coffee. And I'm like, well, I guess you're going to wait 42 miles. Because I'm not drinking something from there. Why am I so brand loyal to that? Why are you so brand loyal to Chick-fil-A? Because they're tapped into one thing, is consistency. Consistency. That's all it is. It's not the chicken sandwich. Senior is not the sauce. It's consistency. It's the fact that you can go to Long Beach and get that same feeling of value. And you can go to Miami and get that same feeling of value. You can go to Jackson, Mississippi and get that same feeling of value. And in your mind as a human, we're all looking for that value, the people to value us. That's why we go there. So think of this blue sign as your organization. Are people going to exit, and what are they exiting for? Right? Think of it as your organization. When someone sees your organization as a Chick-fil-A organization, that's somewhere where I feel valued, how many we go? 1, 1, 1, 0, 0. That's how they feel. It's like, man, I got to go settle for McDonald's and I hope that my fries are cold. Man, I don't even know if this is meat at Taco Bell, but ain't nothing else here on this exit. Or do I get excited when I see what's going to make me feel? How many of you talk about service and not the food? And when I say that, I mean, how many of you have been to a restaurant, you leave and you go, man, that server was awesome. And you over tip. But you didn't talk about the food. You talked about the way the person made you feel. The food became secondary. In a world of consistent value, that's what we're looking for now. We've always been looking for that. We just didn't know it. Because we've gotten used to average. We've gotten used to walking around not knowing anything about each other, not caring if I speak to you or not. Okay with the fact that you're just going to tell me you're in the Air Force and you're from this place. We became okay with that. And then COVID kind of really changed this entire world. It really changed it. But I always like to start, so what are your leaders saying? And I'll go through this really quick. It's not an Air Force brief, but I like to look at what your leaders are talking about. And when General Brown talks about perfect conditions will never exist, and Chief Bass talk about it's about our people, what they're talking about 2 years ago is what is going on today. How many of you know that the Air Force today, the United States Air Force, is facing a recruiting challenge right now? Everyone should know that right now. And that only sounds very like tactical, right? Oh, it's a recruiting challenge. I've heard that before. How many of you think that it's a severe recruiting challenge going on right now in the Department of Defense? Not just the Air Force, absolutely. What have you heard, sir?
For just speaking in my own little bubble, for us as TACPs or special warfare, it's almost impossible. We have to stand up our own special operations recruiters that put kids into a program and train them up before they even get to the pipeline.
Yeah.
And then when they get to their battlefield airman flight, they go through a whole different, they get nutritionists, bod pod, dump tents, they get buffets, nutritionists, everything.
Yep, I was there. I retired out of Air University, and I took a tour down there. Where there was, you guys are down there in Lackland still, old.
They are Lackland.
Yeah. So I tell you, that right there. I mean, we've been talking about this for pre-COVID. We've been talking about this, and the situation is the situation with the last 2 years of COVID and the world is becoming what it is. And I think it's a good place where we're at. We're a human, the generations is shifting, right? It's a shift. So we talk about, and we'll get into that. So just to finish that point, all of y'all should understand what's going on in your own ranks right now. You understand it very well, the challenges of field and special warfare airmen in the future, not in the Air Force, in the Department of Defense. Because all of you are going for the same talent. And the talent pool is that big for a lot of reasons. Do you know today who's been in the Air Force less than a year? In the enlisted side, I'll talk about this, LT, but it's good for you to know. I don't want to make y'all mad, y'all been, so let me tell you, you've been in the Air Force a year, right? I'm sorry? Less than a year. So how long were you in the delayed enlistment program before you joined?
About 2 months.
2 months? About 2 months?
About 3 months.
About 3 months. Would you have joined? So if your recruiter told you had to wait 3 months, which all of you did, and your recruiter called you and said, "Oh, I know you were waiting 3 months, but can you go to BMT next week?" Would you have went to BMT next week?
Yes, sir.
All of you would have went for free. But today, the Air Force is paying $8,000 if you would go to BMT. Same depth airman. If you go to BMT till next week, we'll give you $8,000. That was announced 2 weeks ago. And if that sounds like what, the Navy is in worse situation, and they announced it's $24,000. So this isn't about joining the Air Force or the Navy, like finding a new airman or a new sailor. This is someone who's already signed the paperwork, that already committed to saying that they will join the United States Air Force or the United States Navy. Why do you think we're doing that? Somebody tell me, why do you think we have to do that now?
You get DUI, where fiscal year we're almost 40%
Yes.
The ripple effect, right? So the United States Air Force is set up to run on first-term airmen, pretty much 52% attrition, right? So about 50% of first-term airmen will stay in. If you don't have that next lineup of first-term airmen, then our bottom tier is going to be completely wiped out.
Where are you from, sir?
Ohio.
No, I'm sorry. Got me on that one. Where are you from in the Air Force world?
Aircraft maintenance.
Okay. I can't. Okay. 100% correct. You have some definite knowledge in that. What are you doing in maintenance, sir?
Aircraft production.
Okay.
I'm seeing that too. Did not tie that in. Functional, and our numbers are so good, like worldwide average, like for second termers, but we're so short on our tech school pipeline, and like at least for JBER or even like PACAF, like we have a certain amount of airmen that we need to bring up in the train, and we're like at our lowest numbers, like 40%, and never. We can't fill them fast enough.
Absolutely. So today, there's 50% less applicants to join the United States Air Force than it was this time last year. 50. That's a significant, right? So it's a lot of factors, right? 100 factors you can put in this. There's no one. I'm not telling you that, oh, it's just because, culture. But I'm overly talking about culture and connection, because is that something we can control? Can we control how everyone in this room feels valued, or at least set the conditions where they do? Set the conditions where they feel like this is a place that I work and it's purposeful. This is a place that people are going to take care of me. This is a place that, I can see myself re-enlisting. Because there's no forcing mechanism to say that there's nothing that guarantees Jackson is going to be here for the next 25 years. The way the world says right now, actually the chances of Jackson or any of these airmen over here being here the next 4 years, then it's bleak. Because right now Walmart is saying that, how old are you, ma'am?
21, sir.
21 years old. She's 21 years old. And Walmart just announced 3 weeks ago that if you're 20 years, basically her age or any of their age, we don't care. All you need is a driver's license. You don't have to have a CDL. We're so short truck drivers. Please just come over. We'll train you how to drive a truck. We'll give you a CDL, and we're guaranteed your starting salary is a minimum of $100,000. But again, this is not all. The military has never been about money. No one in this room joined the Air Force and to get rich. I'm one of the only retirees, I think, in this room. I'm gonna tell you right now, if you thought that, it's not the truth. If you thought that you were here to get rich, then man, let's talk at the break, because you need a shoulder to cry on. But I raised a great family with 2 great kids for 25 years, and I don't regret 1 second of my service. But there is a reality out there brewing. And part of that $8,000 and $24,000, and I don't want to stay on this a long time, is just think about this. In those 3 months that these 3 airmen stayed on delayed enlistment, they weren't on any real contract. They can leave they can call their recruiter at any time and say, I don't want to come in the United States Air Force. They're not ours until they're there in BMT. So what's happening in between this gap in depth now, you said it, sir, directly about all the numbers. What's happening really is you having now people, like, how many of you had a high school job before you came in the military? We all did, a lot of us. So imagine if I'm now 18 years old and I'm waiting for 3 or 4 months to come into the military, and I'm at Target, and Target is paying me $22 an hour. And then this memo comes out and they go, oh, we'll help pay for your college. Another memo comes out, oh, we'll help pay for your health care. And then you start going, okay. They're young people making different decisions. We have to get them as soon as we can. That's what that's about. So why am I telling you that? Every leader in the Air Force needs to know that, because the world that changed ain't going to change back to what it was 3 years ago. I retired into COVID, and I will tell you, retiring into COVID was horrible, but the most enlightening experience that I've ever had over the last 2.5 years. because I got to really navigate a new world from the start. You know, I didn't jump in it from today, and this is why a lot of what I do pro bono is transition coaching for veteran, because it's a different world than you understood 2 years ago. And having to navigate that from day one has been different. And having a company that does nothing but organizational culture and deal with a lot of different businesses, I've seen businesses shift so fast because they see at the end of the day that they're not going to be able to field a team that wins. And the thing I talk about with this institution is, are we seeing that same trend? Because at the tactical level, you can make a difference. Because you make a difference if they stay, right? You're not getting out, ma'am. You're retiring, right? And I used to always walk around and say the most important talent in the room is the people who you have to keep, right? There are committed people and there's people you have to still have committed. And you're talking about the 40% and you're talking about not replenishing. You cannot sustain this for 3 to 4 years, especially in aircraft maintenance and certain career fields that depend upon skill level development. You just can't, you're not going to be able to, it's going to have a readiness issue. And that's why I talk about it's culture a readiness issue. It is. It's a readiness issue because now every company is investing in their culture. How do I keep you here? And money is not the decider. Money is not it. You're shaking your head, ma'am. Does money drive you? Does money drive you, Jackson?
Somewhat.
Well, everybody wants to take care of their family, right?
Mm-hmm.
But would you rather be treated like a human and treated like a sense of purpose and be able to be your true innovative self?
Right. Definitely that. I would rather be treated like, like I'm valued.
Yeah. I will tell you that, and I keep picking on them because for those of us who are a little older and have 20 to 26-year-old kids like me, I learned more from them about this generation than anybody. My daughter is a University of Alabama grad, Roll Tide. That's the only college you get to talk about for the next hour. You don't get to say nothing else. If you're not an Alabama fan, just don't say anything. But she graduated from Alabama, and she's an accountant in Birmingham. And in COVID, I learned more about my own kids of how they're navigating, this generation is navigating. And I'll get to that when I talk about the generational. We talk about the world is changing. So we talk about these generations that I talked about. And my daughter is a millennial. Who's under 40? Who's about 30s, early 30s to 40, late, you're all millennials. You know that, right? You're millennials. Everybody be like, I don't want to be a millennial. I'm like, you're a millennial. It's not negative. It's just the generation you're in, right? So when I discuss generations, the boomers are my mom that I talked about, right? They're the folks that your grandparents, and some of you young, probably even your great-grandparents, they're never going to call your grandparents and ask them, have you ever quit a job because you didn't like the culture? They're literally going to they're not going to understand what you're talking about. Like, what are you saying? Like, what is that? What does even culture mean? Like, oh, did you quit a job because your boss didn't treat you nice? And they're going to be like, what do you mean? It doesn't make them bad people. It just says that's the times that they lived in. And then you come over here, all the way to your Gen Z, who's Jackson, who just said, what? I want to be treated fairly. That's a factor in your employment, right? Is a condition of employment for you how people treat you? And she got the real look on her face like, absolutely. But that doesn't make them bad people. We have to get out of our comfort zone and understand that, or you're going to have a problem. Every company, every organization in the world understands that. We understand that in this room. Sometimes it's hard for us to grip onto it. And that doesn't mean you have to cater to Jackson and tell Jackson, hey, you can come to work anytime you want to. That doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that Jackson gets to just go, hey, as long as you show up and do mediocre work, we're going to just be okay with it. Accountability and standards is in any organization. But you have to understand what drives them. And I talk about my daughter being a millennial. She's 26 years old. 2 years ago, about probably 4 months into COVID, her firm went into a telework situation. And then she, like everyone else in the world, she got an opportunity to think about life. And she called and she said, I'm quitting my job. And I said, you're not moving back here. That's not the way my bank account ever gonna work. You're a grown woman that went to college for 5 years, was supposed to have been 4. So you're on your own. And she's like, no, she said, no, I'm quitting my job. And I said, why? She was like, I've been sitting here for 4 months and I didn't like working there. I went there, went through the grind, and I didn't like the way people treated me there. I didn't like the way that she used these words like cohesion and all kinds of stuff like that. Like we weren't a cohesive team and, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, I was raised by boomers. That's foreign to me, right? I'm raised by boomers. I'm Gen X. So I'm like, okay, I'm trying to be supportive dad. Okay, do what you do. Make sure you get another job. She interviews 4 times for a new firm. She gets another job. She calls me excited about this. It took a couple of months. And she says, Dad, I got a new job. It's going to be great. She telling me about the interview and she telling me about the people. And what's the one question Gen X mindset said? How much are they paying? And you know what her response was? I don't know. And my response was, are you for real? This is just generations talking, right? This in this conversation. She's like, I don't know what the big deal is. And she kept going, I love this place. I'm going to love this place. She started talking about the cafeteria and all of this stuff. And I'm like, okay, can you make sure HR is going to pay you money? So she calls me back a week later because she wants me to help her. She always like, hey, can you help me with, look over our benefit package? And she says it to me, and I'm like, this girl's getting paid $10,000 more a year. Full telework, bought her computers for her apartment and all kinds of stuff, and she don't care. She's worried about what, Jackson?
How she's treated.
That's it. She's been working there like almost a year now. And you know what she calls me the other day. She was like, oh, I'm so happy, man. We finally out of virtual happy hour and we had our first in-person happy hour at the team. And I'm like, you getting a raise this year? That's what they care about. And then if you go down the line to my 20-year-old, just a whole nother layer there. Right? She doesn't think money is needed, but she needs my money. So I don't know how that's going to work for her in the future. They're not bad people. We have to understand how to communicate with these people. And this represents a busy slide, but I just broke it down. 5% of boomers, 27 million people changed their jobs in the last 2 years. Not left the workforce, changed. 27 million people said, hey, I don't want to work for you no more. Go work somewhere else. Top 5 reasons: purpose, value. I want to spend more time with my family. The things that people had to pause and go, okay, 5.5 million women have permanently left the workforce in the last 2.5 years. 5.5 million women. It's not returned. That severely hinders our workforce in a lot of areas. Right here, if we can't attract, recruit, and retain these people in the middle, I don't have my red clicker. I don't want to click the wrong button. But if you see this picture under Air Force 2000, there's a class there. Those are 8th graders. Who has an 8th grader? 7th or 8th grader. All right. Smartest people in the world right now are 8th graders. People are going, well, what are you talking about? They can't be smarter than me. 8th graders are coming up, and we got to know how to, if we don't know how to attract the 19-year-olds right now, think about the 8th grader. The 8th grader, the last 2 years when COVID started, there were 6th graders. What did they do for 2 years? Homeschool, technology change. They got used to social constructs that didn't exist. They were on the playground. Now they're on a virtual playground. Parent is teaching them math, pulling their hair out. All of these things changed in 2 years. Now they're in the 8th grade. The world is somewhat coming back. They have a different understanding of the world. 2 years from now, they're going to be what? 10th graders. What happens in the 10th grade for a lot of teenagers in the United States? Driving, yes, but they also start their first summer job. So these kids are going to enter the workforce with 4 years post-COVID, with an understanding of the nature of work that we don't even yet understand because we knew before. It's like talking to people who were in the military before 9/11 and talking to people who were in the military after 9/11. It's like two air forces, right? You go, hey, post 9/11, everything changed on September 11th. And let me tell you what the Air Force was before September 11th. It's the same thing. Now you've got a 15-year-old or so in the workforce. Now 2 years from that, 6 years after the COVID started, who do you have? You have your potential airmen. 6 years in this country, 6 years in a post-COVID where work has changed, the nature of technology has changed, the mindset has changed. Are we ready to recruit them and retain them in our forces? And the only reason I bring that up in this room, because this is what every company is talking about. They're not worried about me when I was the chief because they already got me. They're not worried about Senior Fitzpatrick. They're not worried about, did I say your name wrong, ma'am?
Yep, you got it right.
Okay. They're not worried about either one of you guys as seniors. You're here. You're here. They're worried about them. And not only are they worried about them, they're worried about their little brothers and sisters. How do you adjust? And it's not adjusting to make us weaker, softer. That's not it. It's adjusting the same way that the military adjusted to us. Now, for those of us that have been in a little bit, if you can think back to your first chief, if you've been in the Air Force over 10 years, and you can think back to your first chief when you came in, who probably joined the Air Force in either the late 70s or early 80s, it's different today from most chiefs you come in contact with. Doesn't make them better, doesn't make the chiefs today worse. It's just different. Different set of circumstances, different set of challenges. I came in the Air Force, senior airmen, this might sound weird to some of y'all senior airmen. When I came in, senior airmen ruled the Air Force. Absolutely ruled the Air Force. I don't remember even talking to an E6 when I was an airman. You just didn't do that. Right? My supervisor, most senior airmen were in 7 to 8 to 9 years, all of them, before they made staff. So senior airmen were those very experienced people that you ran into when you got to a base that were your supervisors, that were the people you just went to for everything. And literally, you saw a staff sergeant, you were like, I don't know what to say right now. And then if you saw a master sergeant, you just literally just stayed in the car till they went in the building. And then if you saw a chief, you just was like, it's like seeing your favorite star. You just start blah, blah, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do with my hands right now. It's just different. It doesn't make it bad. It just makes it different. But we have to understand how to recruit them because it's going to be different. So I'll just do this really fast because I'm really fast. So we work with Air Force recruiting. Air Force recruiting kind of provided this information to me. Number 6 is mine. So we just talked through these and I won't stay on this. So you're talking about number 1, not a hunger for work. Audience that's not as hungry for work, right? No shortage of entry-level employment. That's an actual a data point spit out from all of the things that are happening with the force right now. So you're talking about if I can go to all these different places, does that create a recruiting challenge? You're talking about we have lost 2% in all of those applicants of women and minorities joining the military. 2% is a lot. When you look at how many people, how many of you say we have to bring in, sir? One of you said.
Every year, I mean, we're set up to run off of 51% first-term airman attrition, but we're low DoD-wide 38% right now in recruiting. So.
Yeah. So if you lose 2% just in your, how does that affect your D&I efforts? How does that affect where you're trying to be in 15 years? That severely affects that. And y'all might think I'm giving y'all a bunch of doom and gloom. I'm not. What I'm telling you is everyone in this room now controls the destiny. And you always have. And that, why people joined 3 years ago is not why people join today. It's the same reasons but you're not going to have the bigger pool of those people for the same reasons. Because choices is here. Choices that has never competed with military service ever. What's the first thing all of your recruiters told you when you were joining? Education, healthcare, travel. Right? 3 things they told you: education, healthcare, travel. Everybody can give you healthcare and education and money now. So I will tell you, it's no different outside the gate. Everybody's walking from job to job because they're looking for the purpose-driven stuff. I mean, these young folks have just said it. So we're going to talk, you guys need a break. Let's take 5 minutes break. All right. Let's come back. We got like a hour or less to kind of spend together. I want to kind of stop talking so much in my long-windedness self. So we're going to talk about, kind of how do you build skills to get after what we talked about. We just talked about a lot of stuff. How do you build the skills? What do you can do at every level in this room to lead for the future generations that you're going to lead today, right? And we call this collective resilience, right? And it's going to be a hodgepodge of things here over the next 10 or 15 minutes. But collective resilience skills. So if you're talking about collective resilience, like I told a lot of the leaders yesterday, we tend to, first of all, who can tell me what morale, what's morale, sir?
Woo-wee. That's the thing that every airman complains about being low.
So what's the definition of it then, if it's low?
The way I define it is how, like they were saying, how good you feel to come to work every day if you were to come in like 8 to 14 hours a week and then put some of your time. That feel, that camaraderie is like a holistic thing of like how you value, how you're part of the team, everything is working, and then that feel-good factor is underneath it. But to give you a definition,
So Jackson, he said all the things the airmen kind of don't talk about. You talk about morale, Jackson?
I would say it's like more so like your morals and what you believe in and how you go about it.
Okay. Sir, what do you think morale is? Since you're you're joining so there's a disclaimer. Anybody who's sitting in that seat the last 2 days, I call the general.
What I think morale is, like just getting together, get to know people, do like a more of like a team building.
Okay. What about you, LT? What's morale?
I would say morale is wanting to do the work, not because you feel you have to, but because you want to come to work, you know what your mission is, and you have a desire to do that mission with no, fear of repercussion or, I have to get up and do this, but you genuinely want to come in and do that job.
How many of y'all heard the word morale since you've been in the military? How many of you heard the word morale this week? Why do we talk about it so often and we can't even talk about what it is? I mean, it's hard for us to define morale, right? But we talk about it all the time. And I will tell you this, it's not nothing bad about that. I used to use the word morale, but I will tell you, I want you to reframe your thinking, right? We're talking about morale, teamwork, and then we try to put it into a box, right? Like, what, what do we need to do? I will tell you there's a simple formula for morale, teamwork, motivation, and commitment. Simple formula for all 4 of those. The things that we talk about all the time. And I want you to call it get out of the blue, right? I want you to stop focusing on morale. You're like, what does that even mean? I want you to stop talking about morale. I want you to stop talking about teamwork. I want you to stop talking about motivation. And I want you to stop talking about commitment. And I'm like, how's that possible? I want you to stop talking about how do you create a positive climate and a culture in your organization that actually takes care of those things? What is our climate? What is our culture? Who are we? What are our values? What is our purpose? I want you to start talking about those things, defining those things. Because if you define the why and the purpose and I'm not going to put anybody on the spot. I know this is being recorded, but we're going to edit this out, ma'am. All right? Because we don't want to put anybody on the spot. Who can tell me right now, I will give you $500 of free coaching right now if you can recite your mission, mission, vision statement of your organization verbatim. Don't feel bad. I couldn't tell you what mine was probably when I retired either. Right? Isn't that our why? Isn't that our real purpose? I was in a room a month ago. Well, I told you to edit that out because I don't want anybody to think it was just here at J-Bear. I was in a room with 50 full-board colonels doing 5 hours of leadership development. And I asked that question in a room of 50 colonels, and no one can tell me. And the whole point, that's not down in the colonels. I had a lot of conversation after event, and one of the CE group colonels came up to me and said, I literally just had my offsite last week where we develop our mission and vision statement. And I literally can't tell you what it is. And he said, boy, did that give me some self-reflection of, why do I know that? Let me tell you why we don't. Because we have to live our values, not recite them. If I ask you about your particular organization, then I should be able to pick apart how, what really is the mission and values and the purpose of your organization, right? Because you should know how you feel when you get there. You should know, what we do or all of these things. Nobody can recite it because we don't live it. We don't talk about it. It's just a frame. It's probably a frame in this building somewhere that costs $30 with whatever this building falls under, the mission, vision, purpose, and all of that. All those statements are somewhere. They're in your building somewhere. You pass by it when you get a soda. It's not a knock on it, but I'm telling you, I probably, how many offsites I've been involved in that creates those little paragraphs? And I literally today could not tell you none of them, what any one of them said. And then I questioned myself, did I live the values that we came up with, right? If we say that we're an innovative culture, then how are you being innovative? I'm not saying being innovative about a new widget. I mean, how do you have an innovative and inclusive culture? If we say we're an inclusive culture, how are we doing that? I should be able to look at your statement. It says that, and I should be able to go to you and say, how does your organization create an inclusive culture? Because it says it here. This is what y'all do. It's on the wall. Because you should be able to say, oh, this is why we do it. This is how we do it, because we have this program, we do this, because we're living it. Oh, my commander came out and he spoke about it. My supervisor was speaking about it. You create these things over here by being consistent with these things over here. If you have cohesion in your organization, then you don't have to worry about people have teamwork and motivation issues. But it's again about Chick-fil-A. Why go back to that? It has to be what? Consistent. I am the chief, and I'll tell you this because it's, not only my 25 years in the Air Force, I've been doing this around now. We've been doing this for over 40 companies, and I tell you that it's always that word consistent. And I go back to my military service because I'm on a military base, and I think about how many burger burns I have to solve problems. I remember how many times, and the first sergeants got a kick out of this yesterday, because I remember the times as the chief when morale is low because someone said morale is low, and I didn't understand what that meant. And I go to the shirt, and you know what I told the shirt? Hey, shirt, here go $200. Let's have burger burn on Friday. Everybody's definitely going to be happy by the time we have these burger burn. And on Monday, everybody shows back up to what? Exactly the same thing that people were upset about on Thursday. Right? Live your values has to be consistent, and I have been a victim of not doing that. I've been the perpetrator, actually, of not doing that on several occasions. But we have to be lifelong learners, and we have to learn. And that's why I'm telling you, simple formula. Next time somebody talks about morale in your squadron, you should just raise your hand as an E6 in the United States Air Force and say, okay, I get it, we're talking about morale, but what kind of climate are we setting in this organization? What kind of conditions are we setting where people feel valued? Now you're changing the conversation to action. What are we doing to develop cohesion amongst our teams? What are we doing? Because when you ask those questions, now you're talking about results-driven answers instead of saying, well, I don't know, well, we kind of talk about the things and we don't know how to define things. And we always trying to define it. Purpose is a very big one. So we're going to break that down, right? Climate, culture, right? They're different. How many people know that they're different? Anybody know the difference between climate and culture? You're about to say something, man? You're about to say, go ahead.
There's a difference. I'm not sure if I can
Go ahead.
define them in a way that would separate them.
Take a stab at it.
Well, I mean, the climate of what you're working in is how things are day to day, but to me, the culture is like that underlying people's personalities, how we go about doing things that creates that climate that you see. It's like the intangibles versus kind of like the tangibles.
You actually did a really good job at that. See, take a stab at it. Can you have great culture and bad climate, or can you have great climate and bad culture? You can, right? You could have an organizational culture. Let's think of it this way. I walk into Squadron X that has 15 flights in this squadron. The squadron, which is culture set from the top down, the command, this is the culture we have. We're trying to live out values and stuff. I can go through all 15 of those flights. How many of you notice this? And you can have different personalities and different, and I call them personalities, but you have different climate in every one of these flights. You go to one flight and it's like awesome, like these people are just like firing on all cylinders, and you like, why are they always getting together? And their metrics is on high, and they just laughing and all of this. And then you go like 3 flights down the road in the same squadron, and you're like, who are these people? Like everybody wants to strangle everyone, and it's just a tense atmosphere. You can have all of those. What offsets that is, well, I won't say what offsets that. Nothing really offsets that. You have to invest because culture is very hard to change, right? And something that we get naive about is that in 2 years of a leadership track or coming here in the first 5 months, you're going to change culture. You don't. Culture is hard, enduring. It's a long road. It's literally like building a house with no tools. You're gonna really feel every brick you put up there. You're gonna have calluses on your hand. It is hard. Now, I joke about a burger burn, but climate changes all the time. It's Friday right now. Some of you who is this a duty day for? And this is your duty day, right? If I told you right now that right now, in 5 minutes, you're done for the rest of the day, how are you going to feel?
Good.
Honesty, right? I could change the climate. I can have a burger burn on Friday and everybody get together and drink some Natty Lights and they're good. That doesn't mean I change the culture of the organization, right? You can do little things. And the whole point of this is if you really sat down and analyzed why you're not building those things that I talk about here, why you're not effectively building that, because we spend 90% of our time changing climate and not changing the culture. We're doing drive-bys and we're doing scraping runs, and we're not sustaining and being what? Consistent. Culture changes with consistency. You have to be consistent. Because, and it's hard, right? Because you change leadership all the time. Sometimes as an airman, you got 19 supervisors in 3 years. I mean, there's so much change that happens in the military. So much change. But the only way you have an effective culture where people truly feel valued and have shared values and norms and is deeply rooted belief is you have to slug at it. You have to be consistent in everything. Why I point out your values and stuff, because it starts with who we are and we have to all believe it. I just can't recite it. This is who we are. That's all. That's literally how it starts. This is who we are. This is what we are. Good, bad, or indifferent. This is where we are and this is who we are. And this is where we want to be. Changing culture is hard. But we focus on changing climate all the time. And that's not a bad thing, but it's a balance. And if you only focus on changing the climate, you're never going to really ever change the culture, because you're just going to be putting fires out every time they come out. And a great example of that for some of you who are leaders in the room, all your leaders, but your senior leaders in the room, is the DEOCs. How reactionary we are to that. You have that, and then the first thing you do is you try to plug holes instead of taking a systematic approach of how this is going to happen over maybe 5 years. And understand that you're not going to solve the things in there in 90 days. It's just not going to happen. Now, are there things that are solvable in 90 days? Absolutely. But can you recreate this environment of utopia in 90 days? No, you can't. And you got to understand that from a leadership perspective, that is long. And a couple of questions we always ask, you know, we do our own little kind of, I put this from like a 50,000, but we do culture assessments for organizations, not Deoxys. But, you know, does your organization embody its mission? And of course, I changed the slides because you guys are here. I know you're not all in third wing and everything, but does your organization embody its mission? And that's that question I asked, that how do you know you embody your mission if you don't know really what the mission is, right? We can say what we do to accomplish the mission, but what are we here for, right? What are we here for that everyone connects to for real? Now, there's talking points, but what do we connect to, right? Living your mission. Is your organization people or task orientated? That can be a trick question, right? Right? Are you task orientated? What's the difference between people and tasks? What do you think the difference is, sir?
Task orientation, you're always focused on accomplishing the task rather than taking care of the people to help them accomplish the task.
Can there be a balance in that?
Yes.
Back to that first question we talked about, what's the most effective organization you've ever been in? You said one. Most of you said one. The one that I will tell you, I have two. One of the two I will tell you that I was a A1C and a senior airman in this organization, and I've never worked that hard in my life. I've never worked that hard in my entire career, ever. But it's the best organization I've ever been in. I'm talking about 16-hour days on vault ops with nuclear weapons, with 40 pounds of gear on, standing in the rain in the UK. But you know who else was out there standing in the rain every time? Tech Sergeant with a flashlight, walking around. Never forget Tech Sergeant Owens, my area supervisor, walking around with his flashlight. He can be in a vehicle, but he was walking around checking on everybody standing out in the rain while we working on these weapons every day. He built in our mindset what right looked like. I deployed with him twice my time there. Same person, what right looked like. I never worked so much in my life. I'm talking about that was a hard job. I'm talking about, guess what I did there sometimes, Jackson? I came in on my day off. You know why? Because he instilled a day of so much pride and opportunity in us that I went and learned different skill sets that was a rank above me on my day off that I didn't have time to learn when I was actually working. It wasn't that I went into work. I just instilled this sense of, it's people, but the task is hard, but it's about people. He had a way of really navigating those two. Boy, we worked hard. But you always felt like, yep, we worked hard, but man, I'm here to tell you, but we all in this together. I'm here for you. You know, hey, I remember my wife and I, personal moment, my wife and I, so I met my wife, she was an A1C, I was an A1C. I told her I knew her for 120 days. We actually only saw each other for less than 40 days in person because we were deployed. I was deployed a little bit here and there, and we got married, right? So I was on patrol, wasn't supposed to be where I was supposed to be, told them I was on a walking patrol in a different area. Statute of limitations is over, so I don't care if you're recording this. Told them I was supposed to be walking patrol in the DFAC. I was actually in the dorms, and I saw her walking in the dorms, and I was like, I got to go meet this girl. And 4 months later, I was married to her, and we were married for a long time now. So I will tell you, my wife and I, my wife had a miscarriage on our first kid. And I'll never forget, this is nuclear weapons, we're dealing with nuclear weapons, all this stuff, I'm on PRP, all this stuff, and I'll never forget the PRP manager calling me and basically saying he didn't care what I had going on. I need to bring my weapons cards in right now because I had the authority to arm, I guess, whatever. And I'll never forget the sinking feeling, right, I had. And I'll never forget, and I lived like 20 miles away from base. And I'll never forget, I was about to get in my car and leave my wife and go turn these weapons cards in. And I just like called my supervisor, who was a senior airman. And I said, hey, this is what's going on. I got to go turn my weapons card in. And not 5 minutes later, that mass sergeant called me. And literally not an hour and a half later, he was knocking on my door with tears in his eyes. And he said, we don't do people like this. He said, we don't treat people like this. And he apologized. He said, can I talk to your wife? I said, well, she's upstairs. She don't want to really see anybody right now. But he came in and he sat and he said, if you mind if I just sit here with you? And he just sat there. And he was supposed to be at work. And he took my weapons card and took them back with him. And I'll never forget that. And I always ask that question now, is your organization people or task oriented? Because you can get the mission done and still be people orientated. I got the mission done. My supervisor came to my house the next day with my carbon copy leave form, and they put me on leave. And I got back, and I was back out there 14, 16 hours a day, in a week. But you can be task-oriented and be people-oriented. You've got to understand that balance. When we talk about resiliency, mental health, we talk about anything. You have to understand that balance. People are going to need a knee sometime, right? So I think about that when I ask that question. And I ask you to analyze that question for yourself. So there's a card here. Sir, can you help me out? There's a white card. You can. So I just give you paper to write. Can you give me half of those? Can you make sure everybody gets one of those, sir? I got long arms, but oh Lord, man, you got my back hurting on that, brother. Can you give him one back there for me, sir? Can you pass those down, ma'am? Oh, yeah, they'll come to you in the middle. Give him one. So I'm only giving you these so you can keep something with you. So what kind of organization? We're going to do 2 exercises here. I see our eyes getting sleepy. All y'all with those big muffins. It's the biggest muffins I've ever seen. Are those like moose muffins or something? All right, those are the biggest, but I actually got intimidated and couldn't eat one. I'm like, this is literally half a loaf of bread. So we're going to do 2 exercises. I want you to do this one individually. So we talk about what kind of organizational culture and climate is, right? So football fan, I'm a huge college football fan. That's just who I am. I'm unapologetically Roll Tide, right? Just unapologetically about it. But we're going to do a fantasy draft. I'm going to give you about 2 or 3 minutes. What I want you to do is if you had $100 to create what you need today to create the climate and culture that you need in your organization, what would you spend that $100 on? What would you spend that $100 on from your perspective of how you lead, how you view your organization today? If you had $100 to draft, to think about this as a college draft, right? I need a quarterback, I need a fullback, I need 2 wide receivers. But if you could draft the characteristics that you think would give your organization today a better shot at having optimal culture, better climate, it can be your flight, whatever, it can be your supervisor, support relate. What would you spend that $100 on? What is the most valuable thing to you to make your team the team that performs? What do you need? You need a quarterback? You need accountability? You need some more structure in the organization? You need some results? Someone who's more results orientated? What do you need on your team to complete that? You need a little bit more of a culture of respect? You want a little bit more mentorship? You want to be treated more like a family? What do you think you need? What do you need? You only got $100 because in building teams, you don't get everything you need, right? You got to create the team that you want sometime. You got to get to know people and be what values does everybody bring to the team so we can level up on this stuff. But what do you think your team needs if you can bring $100 worth of talent in? You don't have to use the whole $100. Also, I know some of y'all are trying to calculate math right now, like, well, if I do this, it's going to equal 40. Give you guys about another minute or 2 on that. All right, a lot of y'all thinking hard. What you got, Jackson?
Okay, I did use the whole 100, but I chose structure and cultural respect.
Culture, respect, and structure from essentially one of the newest airmen in the room. You finished, senior?
Yes.
You're not. I say senior, both of y'all. That's like saying chief in the room. You finished, ma'am?
Yes, sir.
What do you have?
So I have employees are treated like extended family. Rewards efficiency and promotes teamwork and collaboration.
Okay. What about you, sir?
Values innovation, structure, rewards efficiency, and then promotes teamwork and collaboration.
Okay. What about you, sir?
Culture, respect, and promotes teamwork and collaboration.
All right. What about you, ma'am?
Communication, transparency, and structure.
All right. LT.
Promotes mentorship, structure, and accountability.
All right. What about you, ma'am?
Promotes teamwork and collaboration, accountability, value and innovation. Values innovation.
Boy, you went buffet. What about you, first senior at the table?
Respect, rewards efficiency, and promotes diversity and inclusion.
Okay. What about you, sir?
I spent all my $100. Structure, promote teamwork and collaboration, and cultural respect.
All right. What are some things that's ringing out? What about you, sir? Oh, I know. I got you right mid-apple. What about you?
I did results and accountability.
Okay. A lot of accountability in there. What else did we hear? Culture, respect. Do we all need to say? I mean, do we all kind of value the same thing? Not really, but is that okay? I would argue we would all say you need all of this, right? But not your team is not always going to bring all of this to the table. But how do you know what he values or she values or you value if you don't have a conversation? If you just assume, right? Like I said, some of you in this room can care less if you walk through that door and anybody speaks to you. That doesn't make you a bad human. But some of you get real sideways if somebody walked through that door and don't speak to you. Doesn't make you a bad, or it just makes you, it needs different things. You just need different things to work at your optimal best. That's how your organizational culture works. There's no one right answer. But if you don't know what's lacking on the team, then you can't fix what the team needs. I would tell you the greatest exercise I ever do with this is to have this with all young people on one side. It didn't have all seasoned people on one side. I didn't say old. You get a bunch of A1Cs to do this, and the best part is for time's sake, I didn't do it. I usually have people break into teams. Take a master sergeant, take brand new Airman Jackson, take an officer, and if I have civilians in the room, take a civilian, put you together, and then now do this exercise. It's a little bit more challenging then. Because I say now you're the owners of this team, and you all have to agree to who you draft. Now you have to come and now have communication of why you feel that way. Now you have to really own culture respect. It's easy just to say you want a culture. Why? Why do you want a culture of respect? And what's now making you say that that's not happening to make you believe that you do need this, right? If you say you need diversity and inclusion, what makes you think that it's not a diverse and inclusive environment? And how do we now communicate with that? How do we learn something from each other from the view of his eyes to the view of your eyes? How do we do that? How do we create cohesion? Now you're still eating the apple, man.
Absolutely.
You're going to keep eating the apple so I can't call on you. Every time I keep looking over there, I'm like, bro, you got to get the apple out your mouth. Cohesion. So I would tell you, TAC P, right, sir? You guys do this well. How do you create cohesion in a team, small team environment?
It's going to be awkward, but I don't know.
I'm sorry?
It's going to be awkward because I don't know. I've never had to show up to work because I work with my bros. I work with my brothers. Like, you go through all the training, we go through combat together. we lose friends, we watch people die, and you know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, the guy that you are with at all times 100% has your back. There's no if, ands, or buts. It's trust from the minute.
Yep.
Now, you got to make it through your training.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a long haul for a lot of people. Most don't make it. But I walk into work every day, and I'm with the bros. I know that my CMS leader's probably going to turn the gear light on about 1 o'clock on Friday. And you know, we walk in, you can call a mass starter by the first name. But that's different. Like today, I'm in uniform, and my actually uniform for today is suits. So I put on my uniform coat. I gotta go to this professional thing. I better look professional, not like a dirtbag. So I gotta not be my twin suits. I wish I was, but I'm not. But it's never something that I've had to struggle with. Now there are people that are what we would call dirtbags, and we kind of ostracize them and bring them into the fold, usually by force. Like, hey, you get to show up to work today, and you're gonna execute the mission. Because our mission is it's not a flex, but our mission, quite frankly, is death. Our motto is death on call. You call us, we'll be there. And it took a long time for me to really understand. I'm gonna get on a soapbox kind of for a minute because I didn't used to believe this, but it's always funny because you'd be downrange and you'd go out and you're doing the mission, you take an IED, get an ambush or whatever, and you come back and you're filthy, dirty, you haven't shaved in a while. And he's like, oh, you're TAC B, that's so cool, that's so cool. I'm like, you know what, look, it's cool. I can't do any of this if you're not doing what you're doing. They're like, man, I wish that, like more people would say that. So this is my opportunity to kind of say, hey, like if you guys aren't out there doing, like, I don't care if you're a maintainer, finance, whatever, like if those planes don't fly, then I can't do my job. And I wish more of that from at least from the operator community got out there and was shared with the overall big Air Force to maybe help them understand, like if a satellite doesn't go overhead when I need it, that GPS guided bomb isn't going to be there. It's going to go dumb, and it's going to kill somebody or kill the wrong person. If that intel person doesn't do their assessment and tell me, hey, those are ma'ams, fams, or military age males, or sensor suite. You have to identify a woman or a dog or kids playing. It's that kind of mentality. Like understand that what you do is important for somebody like me. So whether it's running range, whether it's doing my finance paperwork, whether it's helping me out on DTS, or whatever it is, at the end of the day, that cohesion that I need, that I get when I walk into work, doesn't happen. Hope that makes sense.
No, that actually makes complete sense. That's the true essence of cohesion, right? And you just put it in a broader sense, right? And one of the things that I appreciate you talking about is the fact that, you know, the AFSC-driven nature of sometimes the military culture doesn't create that cohesion that you just talked about, right? To see a TAC P and say like, oh, how do I connect to? What do you do, ma'am?
I'm a ground transporter, sir.
A what?
Ground transporter.
Ground transport. All right. So, so how do you integrate into the mission of what he does?
We basically just drive air crews to,
We get to put him on the plane that takes him to do his mission.
Well, how important is that?
It's very important because without us, he'd be walking or wouldn't be getting anywhere.
You see how you said it with confidence too, right? but that's true understanding of who you are and where you lie into this team, right? This larger team, this smaller team. And that's true cohesion. And he talked about that brotherhood, right? I said, and we got this thing about, and it's sisterhood also. I know you're looking at me, senior. But we got this thing where, you know, how do you develop that type of trust in people? You know, cohesion is about trust. You mentioned all the words that create that trusted relationship. Even though both of you do the same job, how do you create trust in your organization between each other? Because I've been employed a lot too, and I've seen I've seen horrific vehicle accidents all over the world, right? What you know, you guys, you know, you're carrying precious cargo, right? It takes a lot of money to create a pilot or to create a Type P or to create anyone. All of us are the most expensive weapon system in the military actually is the personnel, the biggest cost, one of the biggest costs. So you guys, you know, do you see that when you're doing your job? I know plenty of times, as I was a cop for 20 years, plenty of times I was, you know, deployed and and I had to take like a 30-mile bus ride somewhere that I would not rather walk to that 30-mile bus ride, or 200-degree heat in the desert felt like sometimes when you're trying to get on the flight line. But we just talked about that. What motivates the team? Shared leadership. That shared leadership is what we're talking about. That shared leadership is people stepping up to do things because of that sense of cohesion. That is shared leadership. That's not have to be task driven. That's you seeing that maybe he's struggling with, 60 packs on a bus, and you don't have to go out for another hour or so, and you come over and go, hey, I'm gonna take half your, I'm gonna come over and help you out. It's that shared leadership. Or you see that maybe he's struggling with a task and you're stepping up. Small team dynamics is great at that. There's no real, a weakest link is a deadly link, right? In some professions. And I won't say it that harsh because that is our job, right? Is to defend this nation, right? But true team cohesion and true shared leadership happens when I know that you are not at your optimal best. And the only way you know that is everything we're talking about, that purpose piece, right? So, we're at 30 in. I want you to take some stickies. And you can do this, and you can leave the stick. You don't have to get up. Kind of grab me some stickies. And you can, as you go, I want you to put these stickies out. All the stickies that I'm going to have you write down, I want you to put it out on where I'll tell you on these things we have. I'm going to toss that at you like that, sir.
Thank you, sir.
There you go, sir. You can clean that. All right. So I want you to use 2 stickies, right? And there's a point to this later today. But I want you to real honestly answer 2 questions for me. How did we get you? So how did you get here? Not to J-Bear. How did we get you in this institution called the United States Air Force? How did we get you here? And the more important question is, from today, even if how do we keep you? And I know some of you are like, oh, I'm going to retire. No, how do we keep you motivated today and every day after until you take that uniform off to be 100%? How do we keep you motivated? So how did we get you here? What made you join the Air Force? What made you come into the Air Force? And then the second sticky is, you're not going to write your name on it or anything like that. Nobody's going to track you down and hunt you down for your answers or nothing. But this is important. And how do we keep you? How do we keep you motivated? How do we keep you motivated? How did we get you? How do we keep you motivated? Give you guys a couple of minutes to do that. All right, so I want you to hold on to those stickies. You can keep writing until we finish up here in about 15 or so minutes. And there is actually, on the exit, there is a white sheet that I want you to, there's questions on the top, question on the bottom. And then I want you to add that to it. Keep those stickies to be one more. And as you continue to write, you can, but as we go, and finish up, everything is about trust, right? We just talked about that. And I want to finish up with something real quick of how it ties all this together. We talked about, building cohesion. We talked about, climate and culture. We talked about purpose and all of that stuff. I want to talk to you one last real quick thing about how that powerful connection piece is tied up into empathetic leadership. It's not soft leadership. It's not being weak or anything. It's just being understanding of another human next to you. So I want to talk real fast about these 3 empathetic principles, right? If anything here I want you to notice is I want you to notice that black box. Empathy is simply this. It's simply seeing with the eyes of another, listening with the ears, and feeling with the heart of another. It's basically just, how can you put yourself in my shoes and understand who I am so we can connect and be more cohesive together. So you can know when my day ain't 100%. Okay, when you can know when I'm not 100% on my game, can you build credibility and trust and safety with me? That's what all the empathy is. It's not about we all got to hug and cry. If you want to hug and cry, it's fine, but that's not what empathy is. Empathy is not sympathy. It's not the same. So trust, do I believe you? Why would I let you in? And I go through these vulnerability. Can you relate to me? How powerful that is. Connection. What do you know about me? Do you care? That's when I was 140 pounds. An empathetic concern. What do you need from me? What do you need from me? And I show this picture to tell this last little story, right? And I think Sergeant French was here yesterday. He's heard me tell this story. Maybe one or two people have heard me tell this story before. And I tie this all up about the connection piece. And this isn't a resiliency brief today or anything, but I always tie the why. Because the why is the most important of why we even talked about any of this today. Yeah, cool, we have some facts and stuff. But, you know, I talk about this, if I have one resiliency point, you know, we were in the desert for 20 years, right? Literally 20 years, post 9/11. 2 conflicts, more than 2 if you actually really count all the things that has happened in the desert, counting other things. How many suicides have we had in the desert in 2 decades of operating in AFCENT AOR? Who can give me a number? Total in 20 years of us operating in AFCENT AOR. Of all of the more than 19 countries we were operating in with airmen with boots on the ground. Who can just shout out a number? 20 years.
Less than 5.
Less than 5. Anybody else?
20,000.
20,000. Okay, that's a 5. Okay. It's a fair answer. Anybody else? Couple of hundred. Anybody else? Less than 20. I'll just go for that. Less than 20. 20 years. One life is too many. But we've had, how many suicides the Air Force had last year? Anybody know? Yeah, about 100 and, think of 120, 118 or 120. We've had more suicides last year than we had 20 years of operating the AOR inside of AFCENT's AOR. 20 years. General Goldfein, I can't take credit for that. General Goldfein challenged us with that about 3.5 years ago in a small room just like this. And it put so much perspective into my mind. You know, a lot of us have deployed. That sense of purpose or passion and all of these things that occur when you're in the AOR, I always wondered as a chief, how can I bring that back here? How do I bring that back to where we spend time with our families, where we come home and where we go to work with people? What are we missing? And there's been a lot of conversation about that. I had a great conversation yesterday with First Service about this and talked about connection and the lack of all of these different things. But man, just think about 1 year versus 20 years. And I talk about this 1A1C when I was the AFCENT SEL over in AFCENT with CZ, and it was my command chief. I was a KOC SEL and CZ was my AFCENT command chief, and we were there together for a year. And I'll never forget traveling. I was in charge of all 44,000 cops in 11 countries, and I traveled all over the place. I remember I was in Kuwait, and this young airman gave me a blue folder. As I was leaving, I just addressed the whole organization, and I was getting back on my chalk to get out of there, and he just slid me a blue folder real quick. Now, that's the panic mode for me as a chief. I'm like, oh, this ain't gonna be good. I mean, he did it like he was a hostage too. He was like, and I was like, oh man, this is going to be something I could just not. This is going to be a long C-17 flight back to Al Udeid. And I opened it up, and this airman had 5 pages explanation of why he should stay in the desert for 6 more months and how it was going to save the Air Force money and how he's found the greatest sense of purpose and passion serving in the AOR. And this is what he was thinking about since he was in high school, and he wants to stay another 6 months. So I got back to Al Udeid, and I got a hold of that airman, and I commended him. I thought that was amazing. Like, it was calculations, numbers, and how much deployment cost. And I sent him home at the end of 6 months. But the piece of it was, what base do you think this airman was from? Senior, what base do you think he was from? Yeah, it was a CONUS base. What base do you think he was from? Minot. That's always the first base. Minot is not a bad base. Why is the first base? It always comes up. What base do you think he was at?
Was he missiles?
I'm not going to say who.
F.E. Warren.
F.E. Warren. Andrews.
I would have said Andrews.
All right. McDill. Station at McDill. And everybody always goes, it's not the location. It's not the location. Has nothing to do with the location. Nothing. I'm just telling you right now, 11 assignments. And I've been in tropical all the way to Allison Air Force Base, negative 60 degrees. Nothing to do with the location. It's the people. I've lived in tents. I've lived in 4-star hotels deployed. I've did counter drug in the Caribbean, living it up, all the way to eating out of Army cans for 7 months. It's the people. I hated being in the Caribbean for 7 months, living in a beachfront hotel. Hated it. Every second of it. Love the 9 people I lived in a tent with for 7 months. Loved it. Closest people I've ever been to. Loved every second of it. Loved everything we did. Loved the 6-in-1, 14, 15-hour days. Loved it. It's the people. And how important are you in that thing? We got 6 minutes for me to explain this last thing. Why trust and credibility and connection is so important? What does this look like on the screen? So this is a napkin. It's not a trick question. And I will tell you why this is all important. And this is not a resiliency brief, and I didn't really get into resiliency. I did a resiliency brief yesterday with the defenders. So this right here is the most important possession that I own in my life. This isn't the actual napkin. The most valuable thing in my life is actually a brown crumbled up napkin at this point. See, in 1995, I was a brand new airman just like you guys. Actually, 10 February 1995. Brand new Airman Basic, first base, Air University. Think about that. My first base, Airman Basic, Air University. I'm on the front gate of Air University, elite gate guard section. I actually come from a pretty bad situation. You know, I was abused as a kid. All these things have happened to me, right? I brought all kind of stuff in the Air Force with me. I'm actually a high school dropout that became the Air University Command Chief. I actually graduated from high school with a 1.8 GPA. A recruiter let me in after a second time testing on the ASVAB and scoring 1 point over the Air Force's minimum to be an airman. I came to the Air Force reading on a 10th grade reading level. I came to the Air Force with all kind of mental trauma, physical abuse trauma, all you can name. I probably should have I'm the poster child for who not to recruit. And I don't know why that staff sergeant did so much to help me get into the Air Force, but he did. And then here you come, I'm here. I show up to my first base and I'm enthusiastic as any airman you ever want to meet. They called me Airman Run Through a Wall in Fort Dix Army training. I would do anything, volunteer for anything at any time. And I got to my first base and trust and safety, you're talking about creating culture. Why do I live a life of culture and this is what I do? Why I couldn't wait till one day that this is what I do outside of the military? Why do I know the value of everything that we talked about today? Because 140 days after I got to my first base, I tried to commit suicide 3 times. 3 times. First day, and people say, you didn't try because you're still here. I'm like, well, I've actually been told that. But the first day, I put a rifle in my mouth on post as a young defender, and I put the select on fire in a round in the chamber, and I never put my finger on the trigger, and I just was hysterical, and I didn't do it. The second day, I actually put a round in the chamber, and I actually started pulling the trigger, and anyone in here who has any weapons training or anything, an extensive weapon training, know how much pounds of trigger pressure it takes to pull, and I actually saw I was watching the trigger go, and I took mine, and I saw it bounce back. And I really got hysterical, and I just, didn't do it. And the next day, I called my mom and told her I was going to kill myself. and I was off work. And I cut all my arm was all cut up because I was trying to get out of a phone booth after I was talking to my mom, and essentially just cut my whole arms up. And I got tattoos to cover that up. They're a mental reminder. And that third day, you know, when we talk about cashing in everything that we just talked about, the silly tic-tac-toe exercise and all of this stuff we did, I would not be here today if it wasn't for that napkin. See, when I in-processed my squadron, as all of you did, and you new airmen, and I slid a in-process and check sheet over to my first sergeant, and he signed it with his initials, and he slid it back to me, and I walked out of the room. He stopped me, and he said, "Who's the most important person in your life?" And I said, "My mom, 19 years old," and I just rolled out. For 4 months, every time that shirt came through the gates, what did he ask me? Who's your mom? Where's your mom? How's your mom? Did you talk to your mom? Always a mom question. And I didn't care. And the night I tried to, the third night that I was trying to figure out, okay, this is it. I just called my mom and I said bye to the one person I need to say bye to. My first sergeant came into the doggone dormitory doing a dorm check and saw me bloody, all kinds of stuff. And from there, because the essence of time, fast forward 4 months, I go to mental health. I'm an airman basic in the United States Air Force now. I'm a one striper. And he says, "Hey, Airman Simmons, there's 2 airmen that we're trying to send to Kobar Towers. I'm going over there as the first sergeant." And he said, "Do you want to go?" And I said, "Absolutely." So he convinces a major, a commander, to let this suicidal airman who just went to mental health for 4 months get a gun and go to Kobar Towers. And I went to Kobar Towers, and he was not my shirt. He was the maintenance group's shirt. And he came every day of break, first day of break, and picked me up. And we went to a Chinese restaurant and ate. For 3 months we did this. And the dude just talked. 80% of the time he just listened to me. He didn't talk, he just listened. He had trust and credibility from one thing. I trusted him because he built the trust with me. And at the end of that, he wrote on this 8 bases down, and he put in the middle, "Osan Kun-san, when you mature." For some of y'all know what that means. And that's all he said. And he gave me this napkin, and he talked about all these bases. We went back to Air University. He told me one day in the hallway, "Hey, Simmons, where's that list I gave you?" And I said, "It's in my room." He said, "Go get it." Went to my room, got it, came back, filled out my dream sheet. 1 year, 1 month from the day I showed up at Air University, trying to kill myself, deployed for 90 days, I was leaving. I was headed to RAF Lakenheath as an A1C. 17 years later, I showed up to Peterson Air Force Base. Every one of those bases on that napkin was an overseas base. I followed that napkin for 17 consecutive years because of an interaction of a man who asked me how my mom was doing. And I ask people all the time, I gave up some great assignments. Allison Air Force Base was my best assignment of 11 assignments. I was a senior airman. My chief had me a job at the Ramstein Elite Guard. And my chief said, "You're going to Ramstein Elite Guard, 4-star, you're going to be highlighted, and I told him I can't go because it wasn't on my napkin. I know you guys got to go, nice meeting you guys.
Thank you, sir.
And I said, I can't go, it's not on my napkin. And my chief thought I was crazy. 17 years, I followed a napkin with grease on it from a Chinese restaurant. I've never not filled out my dream sheet from that napkin for 17 years, from A1C to senior master sergeant. I've only followed a napkin. And I close with this. When is the last time I spoke with that first sergeant? What do you think?
Probably last time you saw the napkin, or he told you to grab the
Okay.
napkin.
What do you think?
Last 3 months?
3 months?
Probably 17 years ago.
Hmm?
I was gonna say after you said go get the napkin, but.
Last time I spoke to him, he said, "Good luck, Airman Simmons. I know you're going to do great." 15 February 1996. I don't know if that man ever, what he did after that day. Think about the trust that you can build with each other. 1996, for 17 consecutive years, I was arguing with leadership about a napkin. Like, this is where I'm going. That's the kind of influence that you have in each other's lives. When you talk about all this stuff I talked about, cohesion and culture and all of this stuff, it boils down to one thing. Are you a human being willing to give yourself the opportunity to be in another human being's true life? True life. I don't know where this guy is in this world. Biggest impact in my life is a greasy napkin. All because of a connection. And I know I'm 3 minutes over, but with that, I super appreciate the fact that y'all, had this attentive time with me. I would tell you, if you can put those stickies on there as you go out, I honestly appreciate the opportunity to come back to Alaska after 20 years of not being in Alaska, 2 decades. And I appreciate you coming out and spending time. And hopefully you took one thing away that can absolutely make you, first and foremost, a better individual before you ever a better airman, NCO, or any rank that you have in this room. And that's all I got. Thank you.